Okay, so the last point that we're going to add to our notes today, again, you need to have those first four and written out with some examples. The last one is kind of the new content. So you've seen this previously, probably 7th, 8th grade. We just need to make sure that this is comfortable because we're going to be building on this in chapter 11. And it's assumed that we've memorized these area and circumference formulas. So let's go through and just talk about them really quick. You're going to practice them today. Also, specifically, you're going to look at exact versus approximate form as well. Exact meaning that we have the pi symbol in our answer. We're not rounding. Approximate meaning that we plug the pi button into our calculator and come out with some sort of decimal. Okay, so let's first talk about the circumference. Circumference, what does it mean? It means the distance around the circle, right? So when we talk about circumference, we're talking about all the way around the circle. If I were to take a string and I were to measure around the circle and then I were to lay that string out, I could measure that string and that would be the distance around my circle. Okay, that's what we call the circumference. Now, the formula, where does it come from? I'm just going to give you a quick little example here. If we were in class, we could experiment. You guys can experiment on your own, I guess. But here's the center. If we have something that passes through the center, pretend that does. That's what we call, right, a diameter. So when we come up with our circumference, if I were to take a string and let's say we were to measure this diameter right here. So I come through and I take a string and I measure this. And then I were to say, well, how would I relate the circumference to that diameter? Remember, all circles are similar, but some have bigger diameters, right, as the circle gets larger, and then they're smaller in length as the circle gets smaller. So there must be a relationship between the diameter and the circumference. So if we were to take this purple string and I were to come out here and I were to lay it around, I would go do, and one diameter would take me maybe from here to here, right? That would be about one of them. Then I would measure another one here and it would take me from about there to there. Maybe I laid out one more and it took me most of the way around, maybe from there to there. And notice it gets you almost all the way around if you use about 3 of them. Now we know this number, this is where pi is going to come in because it goes around a little more than 3. And remember the numerical value of pi, right, is approximately, and it's always a decimal, that goes forever, is about 3.1415, keeps going. If that's what we're looking at there, then we can use pi to help us represent this equation. So we would say that the circumference is always equal to the diameter, and then we just times that by pi, because the diameter goes around pi times. Okay. Again, sometimes we write it in terms of the radius, so you'll see the circumference also written as 2 pi r, that being because 2, right, times r, that 2 right there, that doubles that radius and makes it the diameter there. So I'm just going to label those really quick. So again, this represents our diameter. Circumference, very basic to find if we know that. And then this would be our radius there. Okay, so we're going to talk about really quick finding the circumference, exact approximate form. And then you also need to be comfortable kind of going forwards and backwards with the different parts of these equations. Now, circumference. So let's look at an example really quickly. Again, I know you've done these before. Maybe it's just been a little while. If we have a circle here on the left, and let's say that our radius length there is 3 centimeters, then we can go ahead and find that circumference. We know that to find the circumference, using that formula we just looked at right there, we would take 2, multiply that by pi, and then we would multiply that by the radius length of the circle. Now, if we want to leave it in exact form, again, the moment you plug that pi symbol into your calculator, you are going to end up with a decimal as the result. So when it asks for it in exact form, that means we don't want to have to round. So all we do is we take the numerical pieces and simplify what we can. So 2 times 3, that gives me 6, and then pi just gets to come along for the ride. And 6 pi would be the circumference of that, and then we're talking centimeters. Centimeters is length, so we can include that there. Okay. Now if I want to approximate that, We use these little squiggle lines that mean approximately. Then we just use our calculator. We take our calculator, we put the 6 in, and we multiply by pi. If you're using the one like we did in class, the pi symbol is the caret button, so right under clear, when you raise something to a power, you push second and then that button, and it gives you the pi symbol. Otherwise, you guys probably see the pi symbol on your phone calculators. So we do 6 and we multiply that by pi, and we end up with a decimal of about 18.8 centimeters. Okay, now that one again is rounded. We rounded it out to a decimal place, so we would call this an approximate circumference. Okay. Again, hopefully we've seen problems like that before. This one you've also probably seen, but we just need to be comfortable with going back and forth. So let's say we're given that the circumference of a circle, so kind of going backwards, is 20 centimeters, and we want to find or determine the diameter. So remember again, the diameter is the line that goes through the middle. So we want to find that. So again, I would look up at my equations and I would say, well, circumference is just diameter times pi. So we're essentially just going to go backwards from that. So circumference, right, is diameter times pi. So my circumference is 20, so I'm going to put 20 in there. Diameter times pi. Now I'm solving for d, and right now I have d times pi. So I'm going to divide by pi. Right, and I end up with d is equal to 20 over pi. Now again, that would be exact form because I can't simplify that. But generally, if I'm asked to round the length that I get, then I would say the diameter is approximately 6 point, and let's say we're asked to round to 2 decimal places this time. So my diameter here would be about 6.37. And then if you ever want to check your answer, plug that back into the original formula and see if that really works. Okay, so there's our circumference. All right, let's talk about area. So area over here, this is the space in squared units. That's really important. When we're talking about area, we're no longer just talking about the distance around the outside of the circle. We're actually talking about the space inside. So let's choose another color here. We're talking how much area is covered by this circle. Okay, and our answer always comes out in square units. So you can tell when something is written out in area because you're looking at squared units. And the equation is easier to remember if we understand that as well. So area of a circle is related to the radius. So we take pi and we multiply it by the radius squared. Now it's not always written like that. But essentially whatever that radius is, you're going to square that. Okay, so jumping down, let's use these same examples here off to the left. So I'm going to use this one right here. Here I have a circle and the radius there is 3 centimeters. Now be careful, if you were given the diameter, you do need to take half of that so that you can use the radius in this formula. Okay, so let's say we want to find the area, and again our radius is 3. So area is going to be equal to pi. We put our 3 in there and then we square that. Okay, now in exact form, again, we just go ahead and square that 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, and then we have pi, and we're looking at this times square units, so centimeters squared. This guy right here, we never put that pi button in the calculator. This is exact form. Okay, and then again, if we want to approximate the area, then we go ahead and plug that into the calculator, 9 multiplied by pi, and we end up with 28.3 square centimeters. Okay, so we can look at both of those. And again, this one's an approximate. So we're looking at that there. Okay, now again, if we're asked to elaborate a little bit on this, so let's say that we're asked to find the area of a circle whose circumference is 20 centimeters. And again, we're going to look at this and we're going to say, okay, the first thing I always do, no matter what assignment I'm working on, is look at what it's asking me to find. It wants me to find the area. So immediately in my head, I'm going to say, okay, well, area is pi r squared. So in order to find area, right, if I'm over here trying to find area, I need the radius. So I use what's given to me to help me find the radius. So again, I have 20 centimeters as my circumference. Now I chose the same circumference as the example off to the left. So if I want to find the radius, right, it looks like I already did some of the work. It would just be half of that, but I'm going to show you once again how we could do that if I wanted to use this radius formula right here. I could say, okay, well, the circumference is 20, and that needs to be equal to 2 pi times r. Well, I want to solve for r, which means I need to get rid of the 2 pi. It's multiplying there, so I'm just going to divide the 2 pi off to this side. Make sure if you are plugging that in your calculator that you put parentheses around that, or it will multiply that incorrectly. So, or divide it incorrectly. So you're going to do 20 divided by 2 times pi. Okay. And when you do that, then you end up with a radius that's equal to about 3.18. Then we can find the area. So your goal again is you needed that radius. So we just go ahead and put that area or that radius right in there. And then we just say, okay, well, if we square that value, the 3.18, and we square that, and then we times that by pi, we end up with our area being about 31.8 square centimeters. Okay, so today you're going to work through finding circumference and area. Make sure that you are looking at the information given. Do you need the radius? Do you need the diameter? What's it asking you to find? What are you already given? And then we'll kind of work with this in chapter 11. So it'll be really important that we're comfortable with the area and the circumference so we can move forward with that. Okay.